there's a flow cycle. This is a map of the experience. If you know where you are in the cycle, you know where to go next. And there are triggers, 22 triggers. So if you can understand how the triggers work and you can understand the map of the cycle, it's not a guaranteed, but you can make it reliable and repeatable.
What's up, guys? We are back. It's been a minute since we've seen y'all. What is this, episode 70, 40, 36?
Justin, do you know?
48. We have a super special guest. You are reviving our podcast after a hiatus. We took it off air for a few weeks. This is Steven Kotler, who we were put in touch with via a friend.
Yep.
And I was first familiar with you from your book. Actually, I didn't realize you'd written it. Abundance and Bold, actually. And then Stealing Fire, which is the one that I'm most interested in. So thank you so much for coming to hang out with us.
It's a pleasure to meet you guys.
How do you introduce yourself? Because I was thinking for this intro, I was like, oh yeah, this is Steven. He is a psychonaut, a scientist. He does futurism. Like, how do you intro yourself?
How long do I got?
Let's do you're meeting people at a party. They want to know.
Pitch.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm an author, I'm a journalist, and I'm the executive director of the Flow Research Collective.
Got it.
So you lead with flow.
Yeah, I lead, that's what and if it goes one step further, most of what I've written about, studied, whatever, is those moments in time when the impossible becomes possible. And how does that happen, right? History is littered with the impossible.
Yeah.
We see it all the time, but how does it happen? That's what I studied. So if I take it out another step, I go there, because I think that's useful. I could list a whole bunch of other stuff that wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah. I feel like the flow is what people would jump on at a party. They're like, tell me more about that. I need to go surfing more often. So what are you most excited? I started reading your newest book, The Future's Faster. And very quickly, I was like, there's too much. I can't grasp all of this. And some of these technologies even make some of these amazing technologies seem moot. Like you talked about the haptic suit avatar, almost putting the transportation stuff to the side, because it's like, why go anywhere on the Hyperloop when you can just sit in your haptic suit?
Well, you know why that's not going to work.
Tell me.
Of course you do, because you have a career that's built upon this idea that we are social creatures who need to connect, right? That doesn't go away. I think the transportation change that's coming, Hyperloop, autonomous cars, flying cars, even Elon Musk's crazy rockets to anywhere, right? New York to Shanghai in 39 minutes before 2030, if his timeline is accurate. They shift really fundamental things, right? Like, what's this? If you can go Las Vegas to Los Angeles in 25 minutes, how big is the local dating pool? How big is the size of the right? How big is this?
Ben just perked up.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
How big is the size of the local school district, right?
Yeah.
Like, where do you live? Where can you work? And there's negatives there too, because one of the things that really protects the environment is cities. Cities are really great for the environment because we leave untracked, contiguous wildlands untouched, and suddenly flying cars opens up. We can live places we've never been able to live before. So really kind of foundational shifts all over the place in that. And I'm spinning in circles because I can't remember what your original question was.
Wait, can I ask?
Go ahead, hop in.
So you mentioned that travel will always be important because of the social aspect of people. But I think you were the one who was talking about when you put on a VR headset and all of a sudden it is so real that the person is in front of you that you can't convince your brain it's just an image.
It is an interesting question, right? The question is, can VR fulfill us completely socially, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that has been the failed promise of technology. Like, if there's any broken promise of technology, it's we're going to connect us together, right? Like, clearly,
you don't think Instagram's doing that?
Well, I always say, like, this is a little off topic, but I think it's pertinent in that I came up, and we were talking about this a second ago. I was a journalist, and I covered the drug war, and I covered all sides of it. And in one of the communities that was advocating for legalization for years, whether it's marijuana or other things, there was a huge concern of, oh my God, we're going to lose a generation, right? Like, it'll normalize, people will learn to live with it, it'll be fine. But the first generation you unleash this upon, whatever the substance is, we're going to have massive problems. And it turns out with marijuana, like we were so well prepared and we took so long to do it, and we made it basically so quasi-legal before we made it right. Like it was really well done, and those problems didn't occur. You know where those problems absolutely occurred? With our technology.
Yeah.
I mean, like we dropped that shit on the general public. We were like, no, just reach out and touch someone and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right? Like nobody saw that coming, and we really did sort of sacrifice a generation. And you're still, it's dopamine. It's a substance of abuse in a sense, even though it's a foundation.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah,
because they're taking their sweet time with psychedelics, which I know is something you studied. Like the proof is out there. It's so good for PTSD, anxiety, but it won't be there for years. But TikTok, that gets to launch immediately, and all of a sudden it's just like,
who knows the effects?
It's amazing because I remember, like, I've been Rick Doblin, who runs the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Research, and one of the primary reasons psychedelics has gotten as far as it's gotten, and Rick was always really calm about it. He's like, the 60s was about like tune in, turn on, drop out. He's like, I want tune in, turn on, go to a bake sale. Like that's my goal. Like I really want to normalize this stuff and make it every day. But I've known Rick since 1993. Right, like, and at that point we would say things like, "Wow, like everything we're still trying to learn was already proved in the '60s." There were 1,000 different psychedelic experiments conducted back then. We have so much data, and it's only, I really think, like in Stealing Fire, we wrote about Robin Card Harris's work, the brain imaging work on psychedelics. I really think that's some of the first sort of really new work that we've seen. Everything else, like Roland Griffith, like people I love and respect and great work, but they were really reproving stuff we learned in the 60s because we don't trust the hippies, and they didn't have double-blind modern research standards and some of the stuff, and there were good reasons to do it, but we haven't, like now is the very first time we're like, oh, this is new. We didn't know that before.
And we're all over the place here, but we'll get back to everything. But you talk about how psychedelics have been pushed down by the powers that be over the course of history, and the 60s is a great example. Reefer madness comes in, they shut down the LSD research in a lot of these laboratories. Why is that not going to happen again the 2020s, 2030s?
I still, like, the psychedelic renaissance that's now going on, and the way people are using these substances is just as, if you want to call it, reckless as we saw in the 60s. Now, personally, I'm of a, like, people want to run around, they want to call it plant medicine, they want, like, you're doing drugs. Like, you're doing drugs. I've got no problem with people doing drugs, right? Every now and again, if you want to radically alter your consciousness with a substance, booze, THC, acid, that's fine. Shake the snow globe, take a vacation, have fun. I got no problem with that. But gussing it up with meaning and all kinds of stuff that, like, it's just as reckless as what came before. It's going to have the very same results. What I don't think is going to go away, because what is really rigorous this time is you can't marginalize the compounds. You can say, wow, they can go wrong, they can be used ineffectively, they can be used recklessly. And I think it's individual choice. You want to do this stuff recklessly. The last time I did acid, it was a while ago, but I went skiing. Right? I was skiing, and I ski fast. So like 50 miles an hour on acid, like,
you're avoiding trees that aren't even there.
It's funny. I was about to ask what recklessly meant, but now
that's what I mean. Okay, it was totally, absolutely, completely right. There was nothing like sacred or whatever. Like, I had been working nonstop for a really long time and could not get a vacation, and so, like, it was an enforced vacation. You had the forced vacation of the actual drug trip, and the next day you feel so crappy you can't work. So it was like, and I think there's real value in that. And these are not, that may be the last time I did a substance.
Got it.
Right. And that was a good 2-3 years ago at this point. That sort of aside, the medical side of this, as a treatment for trauma, as a treatment for depression, as a treatment for some of the very intractable conditions, I think we're going to end up finding that flow. The point is that a lot of stuff that we can't seem to fix, the reason is because you need to change states. That's how you do it. That's how the system is designed to fix. That's how the biology works. So you can't fight the biology, obviously. And what we're learning now, like that stuff isn't going to go away. I don't think the reckless behavior is going to, I can't derail it for good anymore, because holy crap, depression is massively widespread. It is a huge scourge on society. It costs us billions and billions and billions of dollars each year, not to say nothing of the suffering quotient. And wow, substances like ketamine and MDMA and psilocybin are having nearly miraculous effects in some of these intractable conditions. OCD, being treated by magic mushrooms. Take your pick. There's a lot of these things. There's going to come a point, by the way, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when we've figured out the neuropharmacology and exactly what's changing in the brain during state change. Right, there's going to be,
and there's other ways.
There's going to be other ways in and things like that, and you can get all the same. I think better results through flow, but it doesn't happen as quickly, right? Yeah. It's even if you look at the PTSD work that we talked about in Stealing Fire, where they used 1 to 2 psychedelic sessions could significantly reduce symptoms of PTSD or cure it. They compared it to meditation and flow, and it was with surfing is what they used. This was done at Camp Pendleton with soldiers with PTSD, and they put over 1,000 soldiers through it.
Out on the water.
Out on the water, right? And it was 5 weeks. I think we were surfing twice a week, and it was followed by group therapy of surfing to produce flow, followed by talk therapy. Essentially the same protocol they were using with MDMA, but surfing instead of the psychedelic took 5 weeks. Meditation took about 4 weeks, but the results weren't quite as good. So the comparisons are happening, and they're there.
Did surfing do as well as psychedelics?
It did exactly as well as psychedelics. It just took longer.
Yeah,
it took
that's
5
crazy.
weeks. I will also tell you, I think over time, surfing is going to be the more sustainable practice.
Yeah. Because I mean, I've had plant medicine, drug, we call them what you want, psychedelic experiences, and they're incredibly profound, obviously, in the moment. And then there's a very quick half-life where you're going, I'm trying to capture as much of this as I can.
Let me ask you a question. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Absolutely.
but you just got at something great, because I want to ask you. This is what I said to somebody yesterday. And I'm always cautious. I always say personality doesn't scale, biology scales. So if it just works, if it's my experience, I'm always suspicious of, right? That said, I've done a lot of psychedelics over the years, and I have insights. I've learned things about the universe that may or may not be true. Has one of those experiences altered my performance on a day-to-day practical, tactical, right? I'm a really practical, tactical person, and that's what we focus on at the Flow Research Collective. So I've never made any day-to-day life changes. This is how I live my life. These are my routines. This is how I do my work. Like, none of that has ever come out of psychedelics for me. I'm unwilling to say, I mean, I'm sure other people have, that's not been my experience.
I wonder, so were the experiences you had? I feel like part of what makes a psychedelic and any sort of treatment work is the container in which it was in. So meaning that it's sacred in the setup, that you have an intention that you go in with. There's a talking circle afterwards. And then on my part, a concerted effort to integrate the things that you saw. So you had a profound experience of love. What does this mean for my relationship with my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my friends? So that, I can't say that it was just the substance, but for me, my life is transformed completely. On a basic level, I have a dog now that I went out and said I need to learn how to love more deeply, and I need to have a creature.
My wife and I have been running a dog sanctuary forever.
Really?
Oh yeah, we
that's
do hospice
amazing.
care and special needs care for dogs.
That's so for me, one of the things that I took, and we don't need to talk too much about my personal experience, because as you said, does it work for most people is more important than what happens to the individual. But it pointed out that I was very individualistic, getting ahead myself, forming contracts and agreements with friends and business partners in order to mutually grow. But there was very little unconditional love. So when your dog craps on your carpet and throws up everywhere, how does your relationship change? And for me at first, it was very conditional, which is like, now I love you less. You pooped on my carpet. And he's been a very good trainer of, I don't love you less. I clean up the poop. I try to chastise, reprimand you so you don't do it again, but the flow of love is not contractual or contingent. So that for me has been, and something that I'm learning to apply in other areas of life. But I think it has been valuable, and to say for every individual,
And you've only done psychedelics in the realm of.
I've never gone to a concert. I've never gone skiing.
So I don't know if you've done.
By the way, I always tell people, if I was training people in the shit that worked for me, right? Mostly I'd be teaching you how do you ski at 50 miles an hour. We're listening to hip hop at top volume.
Is that it?
Right? Like that's what I'd be teaching. So yeah,
what's your
people.
preferred flow state for change?
Also, what's your shortest definition of flow for people who have never heard the word before?
Yeah, let's walk in.
Because we've said it a bunch.
Let's walk in a bunch of ways. So flow is scientifically defined as an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. And there's tons of synonyms. Runner's high, being in the zone, being unconscious, the forever box. Stand-up comics call it the forever box.
I like that.
So there's the lingo is literally endless. And more specifically, it's just those moments of rapt attention, total absorption. You get so focused on the task at hand and what you're doing, everything else just disappears. Right? I could say it more formally and say your sense of self and self-consciousness vanishes. Time dilates, which is a fancy way of saying it passes strangely. It'll slow down, you get a freeze frame effect, or it'll speed up and 5 hours go by in like 5 minutes. And throughout, all aspects of performance, both mental and physical, go through the roof. And so that was where we started. That's what flow is. And your question, here's what, so this is something that we believe is true. We have a lot of data to be true, but there has not been enough science. And I can't say for sure this is true, but this is something that we think is true. And we've been using it with people and training them, talking about this for a while. So what I think is true is most people have a primary flow category and a secondary flow activity. I'm not saying that you can't get flow elsewhere, but for me, I will get the most flow while skiing.
Okay.
90% of the time when I go skiing, I'm going to get into flow. Writing is my secondary right? And 75% of the time when I sit down to write, I'll get into flow. Most people are like that. It is very...
In that they have a primary and a secondary. Not that it's skiing and...
Right, no. And usually, like, your primary is usually that thing that you did as a kid, ish, and stopped doing. I was a singer. I was a dancer. I did jigsaw puzzles. I studied dinosaurs. Whatever it is, that's usually, right, that's often the primary flow activity. And so the first thing to know about flow is it's essentially a focusing skill. And we can talk about why that is, but it's a particular kind of focus. And like any other thing that changes the brain, there's neuroplasticity involved. So essentially, the more flow you get, the more flow you get. So if you want more flow at work, one of the best things you could do is start spending an afternoon a week doing your primary flow activity. If your primary flow activity was tap dancing. And couple of things. So flow is a massive amplification, and I can put numbers around it if you want, but we know, for example, creativity can accelerate 400 to 700%. It's a huge spike in creativity. And there's neurobiological reasons why, and we can talk about that if you're curious. But Teresa Mobley at Harvard figured out that heightened state of creativity will outlast flow. Flow is like a 90-minute, 2-hour experience most of the time. It can vary, but that's average. That heightened creativity will last a couple of days. So you can spend lunchtime surfing, get into flow, come back to work, and that heightened creativity is going to be with you the rest of the day and tomorrow. Bonus, you're also training your brain to get into flow better. So the next time you go surfing or the next time you try to get into flow at work, the brain gets there a little easier because you're grooving pathways through the brain, and they're the same pathways. So I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but like if you're looking for, I want more flow in my life, where do I start? One place you can start is, honest to God, figure out what used to make you feel this way. Do more of that and don't feel guilty. Don't feel, right? Like a lot of people who are interested in peak performance, a lot of people who are listening to your podcast they don't relax easily. Hard to take an hour or two to do something like tap dancing or surfing or whatever if you're very success focused and career minded and all that stuff, because you don't think that's going to help me be better. And the truth of the matter is, no, it really will.
Is there, obviously it's individual, but do you find, what is it, the Flow Research Center, do you find that there are reliable, like, writing's the way in for many people, or surfing is the way in? So, like, is there a big category that stands out?
Yeah, no, let me just walk you in, because you'll like it. So this is not just our work, though we've been very involved in this. This is work that goes back to Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, sort of the godfather of flow psychology. A lot of other people have worked on it. So what we now know are that flow states have triggers. These are preconditions that lead to more flow. And the easiest way to think about this is flow follows focus. It can only happen when all of our attention is in the right here, right now. So there are 22 known flow triggers. There are probably way more, but there are 22 we know of. And they all do the same thing. They all drive attention into the present moment. And they do this in one of three ways. They either drive norepinephrine or dopamine into your system, and norepinephrine and dopamine are they're pleasure chemicals and reward chemicals, but neurochemicals are multi-tools, right? They serve a lot of different functions in the brain, and both dopamine and norepinephrine are powerful focusing chemicals, right? When they're in our system, we're excited, we're enthusiastic, we can't stop thinking about the thing that we're thinking about, we can't stop paying attention. That combination, by the way, is the same cocktail as romantic love. Mm-hmm. So like the kind of obsessive focus you have in romantic love, it's that combination, right? So triggers either drive those neurochemicals or they lower cognitive load, which is all the crap you're thinking about at any one time. Sure. And if I lower cognitive load, I free up more energy to focus. So there's 22 triggers. They all do one of those three things. Some of them do two, some of them do three. And they vary. So there's a whole series of dopamine triggers. So anytime you take a risk, physical, emotional, psychological, you get dopamine. Novelty produces dopamine. Complexity. So when you look up at a night sky and you see an overwhelming amount of complexity, and it's sort of like the brain sort of pauses to process it, right? Freezes, you have awe. It's the front edge of a flow state, basically. And unpredictability. Also, pattern recognition when you link two ideas together. So you've done a crossword puzzle, that little rush of pleasure when you get a right answer, that's dopamine. And you get it because whenever we link two ideas together, pattern recognition, it's really good for our survival, cause and effect, right? Helps us get more food. You get dopamine. So there's a whole bunch of triggers that drive dopamine and so forth. And there's, individual triggers, what would drive me into flow or you into flow, and then there's the shared collective version of flow state, what's known as group flow. It's a team performing at the
chanting and marching together.
Chanting, marching, and there's 10 group flow triggers, and you'll like this because we were talking about improv comedy earlier. The guy who did the research, his name is Keith Sawyer, is now at the University of North Carolina. What he did is he filmed Second City Television, the improv comedy feeder troupe for Saturday Night Live, for 15 years, and then he developed this incredibly painstaking frame-by-frame analysis technique to look at the video, and he was sort of doing what you guys do for charisma or people skills, and he would say, okay, he's looking for the moments that
it clicks.
Everything clicks. Laughter, you can judge the audience laughter because the audience laughter goes way the fuck up, right? Everybody's funny all of a sudden. It's clicking. And so he worked backwards from that moment, and he started asking, well, what is everybody doing? What's happening? And it's gone for a lot of people have built on Keith's work, and there's lots of different subdivisions in group flow. There's relational flow, me and you talking together. There's something called team flow, where the flow triggers themselves are sort of built into the foundational team dynamics, so you don't actually even have to do anything there. The way
just
the teams are organized. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll give you a really great example of that is skunkworks. So most companies, if they want to innovate, they build a skunkworks, and the original idea, keep bashing
You're totally okay.
The original idea came out of Lockheed Martin. We wrote about it in bold, I want to say. But if you look at there's 14 rules for skunk or whatever they were.
You need to be left alone. You got it. So skunk works, for people who don't know, are these tiny divisions in companies that don't often have a direct profit motivation. It's like, go pursue your interest, and we're not going to subject you to the same rigors of production that we have for every other division.
Right,
that we
and
have.
Best and brightest ideas, no ideas too wild and weird. And the most important thing is autonomy, right? Autonomy. So one of his rules was you only report directly to the head of the company. You never have to, there's no management chain whatsoever. All those rules, a lot of those rules are flow triggers. They're right. So that would be a case of what we call this team flow, right? Where the rules for how we run a skunkworks produces group flow, which is great because creativity, innovation go through the roof when you produce group flows. If you want a successful skunkworks, you have to do that. And so it's awesome that they're sort of built into some of the rules for skunk.
Yeah. So people sitting at home, they're going, okay, I have a free afternoon. I want to play with this flow thing. I'm not really sure. I've kind of repressed my childhood. That stuff's all gone. Where's high likelihood places for me to start? Is it in writing? Is it in vigorous activity? What is one of the most reliable ways for a majority of people to start this?
That's a hard question to answer because it's going to be very individual.
Okay, that can be the answer.
It's going to be very, very individual. If you're wired for action sports or contact sports, they're both fantastic.
I liked MMA. That was
I was actually thinking surfing and MMA.
Yeah, I mean action sports and contact sports because there's physical risk involved, and usually the amount of risk is a lot smaller than the perception of the risk, right? If you've never surfed before and I take you out Santa Monica and it's 3 feet, you're going to be scared, right? 3 to 4 feet is going to scare you when you actually, I mean, by the way, the first time I ever went surfing, 3-foot wave put me in the hospital. So that besides, like, you can't actually get hurt.
Risk is real.
You can't get hurt, but you got to be a moron like me to get hurt in 3-foot surf. No, so.
Is it fair to say that a good way to look back on your life, if to tell if you were in flow, is it ends with a state of euphoria?
Well, all the neurochemicals that underpin flow, and there's 5, are feel-good drugs. They're the most powerful feel-good drugs the brain can produce. So one of the things we know across the board is that the people who score off the charts for overall well-being, life satisfaction, happiness, meaning in life, those are the people with the most flow in their lives. It's a direct correlation there. General rule, by the way. So quick shorthand for how learning and memory work in the brain: the more neurochemicals that show up during an experience, better chance it's going to move from short-term holding into long-term storage, right? One of the other things neurochemicals do is tag experiences as super important, save for later. So flow, because it's this enormous cocktail, tends to be what you remember. So if I ask you, give me your 10 happiest memories from the past 20 years, some of them are going to be romantic involved, right? I'm guessing a lot of them are going to be flow states.
Yeah.
They're seared into memory that way.
Are those separate? Like if you go out and you meet someone and you're euphoric about it, could that not be when you were flirting a state of flow?
I mean, you could have relational flow for sure. Like when you're falling in love, right? Those intense that's relational flow at its finest.
Got it. Do you have more flow? I want to pivot if you have any other flow questions, though.
No, go for it.
So, hard pivot right here. We'd mentioned this at the beginning, and it's been
We're going back to technology.
Mind. So, tech and morality. So, I don't know if you saw yesterday.
What's the name of the latest book, by the way?
The Future is Faster Than You Think.
Cool. Just because I think people are going to find this interesting and want to get it.
Cool.
So, Chris Matthews, I don't know if you saw yesterday, stepped down from Hardball.
Oh.
And he kind of just went on air, and he says, I'm leaving. He does this in the first 5 minutes of his hour, so they're scrambling after this because he wasn't supposed to. A lot of people in the past of my generation, including myself, said some things to women that are not okay, but it was okay at the time, but I'm sorry for it, so here I go. And you get the impression that he made some comments, as he says, that many men in his position at the time were making because it was morally acceptable, if not by today's standards, than by the 1950s, 60s, whatever. And so what I'm seeing is that our moral standards on the back of technology are changing rapidly, because part of the reason that it was okay to treat women the way that they were treated was because it was at the home, and technology changed in such a way that now we have an economic system that has women in the workplace, and it's more obvious, and they have more agency, and all of a sudden that's not okay. So I'm looking at how homophobia has gone from the most common name that somebody was called in my elementary school to this will stop your presidential bid, like in incredible changes in moral norms on the back of technology. And I'm just curious if you've thought what this means, because it seems like by the time that we're 20 years older, in my case 50, in your case probably 50 as well.
I love you, man.
So by the time 20 years from now, that we're going to look back and the having eaten meat and having Instagrammed your meal, now that there's these Beyond Meats, you're really going to look back and, oh my God, that person had a steak and he was flaunting it. I'm curious if you've thought about the moral implications at all at this rapidly changing technology.
So so that's a great question, and the answer is yes. And the caveat is I don't necessarily know how coherent but we're going to fumble our way through a bunch of stuff.
I like fumbling.
So the first thing I have to point out is the change we're seeing now to try to credit technology and the generation that has grown up under technology is really doing a disservice to people who started in the 50s fighting really freaking hard for this, and into the 60s and the 70s.
So you mean the social changes that we've seen?
Yeah. I mean, you have to, so I always say this to people. When I got out of high school in 1985, I hated business. Business was like Satan. Was what did, and the reason was all the things I was interested in: passion, curiosity, creativity. Like you couldn't walk into a boardroom and say things like, "Oh, we're going to try to make this company more passionate, more creative." Forget like triple bottom down, and we want to do a social good at the same time. You couldn't have those conversations. Men couldn't have emotions when I was a child. In fact, as a scientist, I will tell you that emotions were not a real topic for science until 1996, when a guy named Jaak Panksepp, who's a neuroscientist at the University of Washington, brilliant genius, who traced the 7 foundational emotional pathways found in all mammals. So suddenly people went, oh wow, there's actual neurobiology. These are distinct neurobiological systems that produce grief and produce anger, and oh, this is a real thing. Suddenly you could talk about emotions. Like, we have come so far so fast, it's astounding. And a lot of it happened without technology, or with really primitive technology. I mean, if you want to talk about the largest shift, one of the largest shifts in perception of African American culture, and people don't like to talk about this now for obvious reasons, but was Cosby on television. Suddenly there was a safe black man in everybody's living room, and people could suddenly go, oh my God, black people aren't scared. I can write Will and Grace. And by the way, I know
I think these are massive transformational.
And I know the people who created Will and Grace. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were like, well, we want to do Cosby for gay people. That's like, it was done in, I mean, like, great shows, really good theater, but like there was intentionality.
No, there's someone trying to do this for people in the Middle East, and he literally goes on talk shows and he goes, I'm trying to do it for animal rights. What Will and Grace did.
We have a movement called Dogs on Film that comes out of the animal sanctuary, where we're trying to get Hollywood to start including animal rescue and really simple dog rights. Don't go to a breeder and buy a dog. It's insane. Go to a shelter. We kill 20 million dogs a year in America, right? Don't perpetuate this by going to a breeder, that kind of thing, into television. Because it's right. So
that's a great example of a technological shift just speeding along these.
So my point is, though, it's not the new tech. It's it's how do you share the information at speed, right? Is one. Two. Here's where things get really interesting, and this is what's sort of interesting and exciting. And this is the first time. I don't know the first time it was written about. The first time I noticed it. There was a book by Robert Wright, who called Non-Zero. And when Clinton was in office as president, one day, the story goes, I don't know if this is true, but it caught my attention, that he came into work one day, he had read Non-Zero, and he said, okay, if you want a job at the White House by tomorrow, you have to read this book. Right? So the entire White House read the book overnight, is my understanding. I don't know if it's true or not, but I love the story. Anyways, he was the first guy. He was a game theorist, and I won't go into it, but he started to notice that society was evolving from playing zero-sum games, which is like I win, you lose, to non-zero-sum games. Either we both win or everybody loses. And the classic example is nuclear war, right? Either we don't have a nuclear war and everybody wins, or we have one and the whole world loses, right? Climate change is one of those games as well, kind of thing. And there's a lot of, so he started to notice that we were evolving that way. Steven Pinker has pointed out we're living in kind of the most peaceful time in the history of the universe, right, in his History of Violence book. And the Harvard Development Project, where they've been studying adult development for over 100 years now, discovered that millennials, for example, are as empathetic as at age 30 as my generation was at 40 to 50.
Yep.
Right. So that is like our morality is fundamentally like shifting and evolving and changing, and technology is speeding it along. And I think what you're looking at, the hard, let's call it the hardball reaction for lack of a better thing, is the pendulum always swings both ways. Right. You put an African-American man into the White House and it was followed by, right, like it's going to go back and forth, it's going to go back and forth, and sooner or later it sort of gets to the middle ground. And it's funny because I remember we were like I was mostly late 80s, 90s. That was sort of, I'm an old punk rocker and I come from the Midwest, and that meant like if you were weird in the Midwest, it didn't like, there were no divisions. Like if you were a transvestite communist, you hung out with the punks and the hippies, and because it was like, we were like 2,000 of us, and there were a lot, right? And
you couldn't be intersectional at that point.
There was no like we just had to stay together because that was just like that was the only way we were staying alive, right? Kind of thing. And we always thought, oh God, our big breakthrough, right? Because every generation thinks they like push the ethics farther than, and we thought what we had done is we had like normalized, like in the 60s, we were doing this stuff, but they were making a big deal about it. They were shouting, oh, look at me, equal right, right? Like it was really loud. And we thought by like our generation, it was just normalized. Like we just didn't care. You believe what you want to look, how you want to look, sleep with whoever you want, like whatever it is, we're down, we're fine with it, and we just don't want to make a big deal out of it. And we thought, oh wow, this is progress. And now we're like totally back to, oh my God, we got to shout about it, we got to make a huge deal about it. We have progress, it's not fast enough, we haven't gone far enough.
God bless you.
And all those things may be right. I'm not disagreeing with that point of view. I'm just saying history is a funny way of repeating itself along these lines, and whatever the technology at the time is, it seems to be advancing it forward.
And so and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but
I mean, I think the way I see it is that what technology does is it enables the populace to kind of have a power, if that makes sense. So cancel culture can only exist because of social media, which is to say, if a big hotshot does something that someone underneath him feels uncomfortable about, well, they can't report to him because he's their boss. And if they go to a news station, they go, I can't report on this, I'll lose my job. But now they can just go to their own social media, which allows things to happen the way that they are. So that's
the problem is
what I see.
There's no course correct in the system, right? The course correct these days is Dave Chappelle, right? That's and a couple other people. That's the course correct, and that's what we have. Yeah, I mean, we figured out how to move things fast and but he's not wrong. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, but there were different times. The rules were very, very different.
That's kind of
the game was very, very different.
That's what I see with a lot of these people who are, tweets from 10 years old. It's. I think a lot of people view morality as if it was this absolute thing, and where we are at in 2020 is what it has always been, and it should have always been.
What it will always be.
Yeah,
that's the thing that people get confused about.
So you guys probably don't know this, but I also write novels, and to write the future is faster than you think because the level of technological acceleration is so complicated. And what this book is about, convergence. So it's converging exponentials. It's this accelerate robotics meets artificial intelligence meets 3D printing, and and it was really, even though I've been researching this, I'm an expert in it, et cetera, I couldn't hold it all in my head. So I wrote a sci-fi book called Last Tango in Cyberspace. And there's a lot of these ethical questions. And one of the things we're seeing for sure is, one, we're going to start seeing a keep humans pure movement, because we're going to start being able to genetically augment this and that. And there's a whole punk rock biohacking movement where they want to cat's eyes and regrow tails and all kinds of weird, right? But that's all, like, people are working on it and it's coming, and we're hybrids and all that stuff. And so we're about to discover a whole bunch of new hates we've never had before, and then we're having to overcome them. And that's, just seems, the other thing nobody, with the intersectional stuff, the brain, whenever the brain meets another human being, it asks it asks a fundamental question. Is this thing like me, or is it not like me? And if it's like me, I can cooperate with it, and maybe we can make more resources. I can have sex with it, and maybe we can make more me. Or if it's not like me, maybe I should run away from it, or maybe I should eat it. Right? That's the fundamental question the brain is asking. Is it like me or not like me? Where the brain does them primarily because it has helped us survive. And the fastest way to get the brain to put an them is to put a name on it. So it's a double-edged sword, right?
Now we're coming back into the psychedelic realm. I like this.
I mean, but I love the
labeling.
Like, if we look at what's going on with sexuality, right? We now have 70 different gender pronouns and different ways to represent groups, and that is a whole bunch of people saying, "Hey, look at me. I'm something different. I've got a distinct, and I've got rights." And all those things are true. I'm not disagreeing, like, absolutely accurate. The problem is the minute you put a name on it, you are creating an us-them divide.
Separated.
Like, you're the very thing you're trying to overcome, you're fighting against the way the biology works. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, and biology's right, and we're like, can evolve beyond that. But I'm saying, in peak performance, as I said earlier, much of it is trying to get your biology to work for you rather than against you. And so I think about these things this way. I think about the ethical questions from a biological perspective, and how do we make it work that way?
It seems to me that the us-them question, almost at its core, is is this me? Do I identify with this? Is this my nation? Is this my people? Is this my person who shares a belief as I do? And you talk about I forget what the words that you use, but you talk about this layer of interconnectivity that's going on all around planet Earth, such that our thoughts and emotions via Twitter are being transmitted instantly, but even faster than that once we get these Elon Musk Neuralinks, and it's such that I can feel what other people are feeling. And weirdly enough, it's not even a question at this point of, is this person like me? It's almost instantaneously, this person is me, because if their thoughts are occurring in my head.
Yeah, that was
my right hand and my left hand.
Peter and I went to that. So the book is really focused on what happens over the next 10 years. And we go industry by industry, right? We don't go too far out. But the last chapter, we look at the 100-year view, and we look at when the way we did it is by looking at migrations. Because migrations are one of the largest forces for mass change in history. And we're entering an era of 5 of the biggest migrations in human history are all starting to unfold right now. And one of them is the brain-computer interface migration into this hive mind world. And it's not, I don't think this is not next week. This may not even be 2030s, but the technology is moving shockingly. Nobody was more skeptical about brain-computer interface stuff than me. And, but I started when I read Charles Lieber's original research out of Harvard that Elon Musk is building his technology out of. I was like, holy crap, this is a lot farther along than now this is a problem of scale. It's not a, can it work? No, it works. It already works. Can we scale it up? That's an entirely different set of
weirdly
problems.
enough, Twitter is happening. Now, granted, it's through the medium of me reading text. It enters my brain, creates a feeling. But if somebody tells a harrowing story on Twitter, they can instantaneously, essentially, create feelings of compassion.
This is where the term empathy came from. Originally in the 1800s, this was the problem they were trying to solve. It was art theory. They were like, how the fuck does a painting work? I look at this photograph and I somehow feel what the photographer was feeling when, it's the photographer's emotion when they took the photo transported through time. How does that work? Right? It's the same.
It's getting faster, and the scale's occurring. So one of the things that I feel like we almost have a model of this you said it's happening faster than ever. There were at one point only single-celled organisms. And then I assume over the course of millions and millions of years, they started cooperating in ways that eventually became indistinguishable from multi-celled organisms. And I feel like we're at this point in human history where we are.
Yeah, well, we're at that. We made that. I think we said this in bold. We made a similar argument in bold, but you're taking it into future and faster, and you're totally right. The history of evolution, the history of cooperation. Right? Each great step forward is involving some kind of foundational leap. And we don't think of it that way, right? We don't think of the fact that the human body is, we're a multicellular organism. It's a huge cooperative entity. In fact, honest to God, this is a legitimate question in flow science. So flow is optimal performance. We are made up of a lot of non-human organisms. Right? A lot of bacteria, a lot of viruses, a lot of stuff that are not human. And so the question we've been asking is, when we say optimal performance, does it mean that all the biology that's inside of us is optimal? Is the microbiome, right? Are the organisms that are not human working for the benefit of
when the red blood cell goes and kills itself to prevent an invasion, is that optimal performance? There's this sense of self that has transcended any of those individual cells.
Interesting, right?
And now we've seen that with armies, sacrificing themselves for the good of the nation. But I feel like we're at this crazy thing, because when I read The Future is Faster, or at least parts of it, I got very scared. I was like, there's no room even for me, because you talk about how there's these cameras that can view micro expressions on people and instantly tell you what they're thinking, feeling. And I was like, well, there go charisma breakdowns.
I see what you're saying.
But it won't matter. That's the thing that I take away from it, is there'll be no scarcity of resources. I'll be able to plug into VR with my haptic suit, and we'll have a singularity. I won't need a job. I won't need charisma on command. I'll just be part of this big organism where my thoughts are everyone's thoughts.
But once again,
you're not losing at that point. Weirdly enough, you're winning.
but there's still the joy. You guys have so much fun figuring out why Matthew McConaughey is charming.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're going to be doing this for a while because it's what you do. It's a way of thinking about the world. That's fun. And I think that point is like we get to do more of what we want to do, right? And it's we get there the hard way. It's uncomfortable. Technological unemployment is going to remove a lot of kind of blue collar, the feeling
that I had was like, this is the end of me being useful in the ways that I'm so conditioned to being useful, and of everybody. But I guess we have to find new ways to become maybe not useful, but just I don't know what the new verb is.
So I will tell you I came up as a journalist, and I these new terms aren't going to mean anything to you, but I was what's known as a new journalist. New journalism was a movement in journalism in the 60s and 70s, and I was part of a revival group of journalists in the 90s. Most of us were on staff one way or another at GQ and Esquire by the end of it. But it was a style of long form narrative writing, 10,000 word articles, 12,000 word articles. And by 2007, it was gone. But it was just gone, right? So how angry do you get when you spend 30 years becoming best in the world at something, right? Literally like best in the world, top 100, top 200, top 500, whatever list you have, and suddenly it's gone. I was for like about 6-7 months, I'd never actually like had real deep seething rage that lasted a really long time, probably other than how I felt about my parents growing up.
I was just going to say that.
Sorry, Mom, Dad, love you guys, but yeah, okay, but no. So when that is a real thing. Like when I watched my industry go away 2 different times.
It hadn't occurred to me that you've experienced this because you're a journalist.
Yeah, one of the reasons I feel okay to talk about some of these things out loud because I really I did live through a bunch of them. I've experienced the upside. I helped found one of the first online magazines. I worked on the very first video game that had biofeedback. I was in a lot of the startup early San Francisco stuff, and I got hit by it as well, and got my ass kicked by it. So I think I've been on all sides of it, and I will tell you that a big topic of research for me is you wanted to know some of the stuff that I'm focusing a lot on. One of the things that I focus on now a lot is what I call long haul creativity, which is how do you maintain high levels of creativity and innovation over the course of a really long career. And I'm interested in people who have sustained their creative talent and continue to nurture it and grow it, and that way, or people who have reinvented themselves in 5th act, 6th act, 7th act, right? And they're still how do you do that?
Yeah.
And how, right? Really fascinating to me. It's a whole different set of skills than actually just
what have you found?
creativity.
I'm personally interested because I feel like we're at the end of an act. I feel like we've done our thing. We can cut things in and out of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Rian actually was talking to me a little about you guys, and I said something. He's like, you should tell them. And I was like, I don't know if it's my place, but I'm going to tell you, and you can cut it out if you want. Which is, he said you guys were going to move away from the videos and bring in scripters and things like that. And what I said is, I hope they don't do that. I hope instead they lean deeper into their craft. And what I meant by that is you guys have only started to scratch the surface on the science of actually what's going on, and you're great at it. Everybody I see who's doing charisma stuff or any of this stuff is trying to do what you guys are doing. You guys are better at it than the rest. You have a market advantage. The science that you've already been dabbling in, that's where I would lead. I don't know you guys.
No,
I don't know where you want to go. But
I
was like, I want them to double down. I was like, no. I want them to go deeper and don't outsource the craft. Double down on the stuff that's great. Outsource the stuff that sucks.
So in relating this to what you said, and we won't cut that because I appreciate the feedback. How does one know? For instance, you said 5th, 6th, 7th acts. Well, how do you know? That's part of the issue. Is it time for Act 2, or is it time to double down and continue on Act 1? And then, what are the things that you've started to find in your preliminary research that enable people to reinvent themselves? Because I personally, being on YouTube, I think of PewDiePie, who's the biggest YouTuber and has reinvented himself. I don't know if you know this, a half dozen or more times. Just he's doing video games now. He's doing news now. He's doing this, and he seems to follow his interest.
Yeah, this Peter and I say this all. Peter Diamandis is my co-writer in the Futures Fest, and we say this a lot because people always like, how do I build a business in the future? And I always say is, here's the greatest thing about all this accelerating technology is it all comes with user-friendly interfaces. So that we tell a story in the book about quantum computing. Let's just say this is the craziest sci-fi technology, right, ever, and now it's real. And one of the places it's real is in Berkeley, California at Rigetti Computing. And when we talk about that, and here's the crazy part, quantum computing is the most far future technology you could possibly imagine. You can go to rigetti.com right now, and you can download for free Forest, which is their app developer's kit for the quantum world. And you can run programs on Forest. Over 1 million programs have been run by normal people. So every single accelerating technology has a user-friendly interface.
And I just read this chapter, so correct me just to give people a little bit of grounding here. So Moore's law is that transistors shrink in size and they double in power every short 18 months or something.
Exactly.
This breaks Moore's law to the extreme in the positive direction, which is to say it goes even beyond exponential of that.
It gets really, so quantum is it's a weird thing, right? Because with Moore's law you have bits. They're binary, on, off. Because of how quantum dynamics work, you have 4 options or more. So the way we always explain, so qubits are bits in quantum computing. So right now we're at a 50 qubit computer. Google just announced it. It's sort of, that was the line was, they called it quantum supremacy, which is we built a quantum computer that can solve a problem, it was a mathematical problem, that a classical computer, a traditional computer can't solve. So we just crossed that. We're about 50 qubits. 50 qubit computer, and Google didn't, it's not a really robust working, we're not really there, but let's just say we are. We're not quite there yet. That's basically 50 million songs stored on an iPod. It's a lot of storage, it's a lot of power, it's a lot of memory. If we bump that up to 80 qubits, so I just add 30 qubits to it, like not a huge shift. The Rigetti quantum computer that was to the previous generation of Google's quantum supremacy that you can access is 32 qubits. So we went from 32, a year and a half later, I think it was 50, right? So we'll get to 80 fairly quickly, a couple of years. If every atom in the universe could store 1 bit of information, an 80 qubit computer has more processing power than all the atoms in the universe. That's what it's huge. Now,
wow.
What does it mean in real life? Like text 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Because quantum isn't quite there. It's coming very soon, though, this decade. The low-hanging fruit is drug discovery and material science. So new materials, which is great for solar and some of the environmental technology, really fantastic for that. Low-hanging fruit is drug discovery, new compounds. That's what's gonna shift first.
Fast.
I have a follow-up question that's completely self-interested. So I think one of the things that Charlie is struggling with is after doing the same creative pursuit over and over and over, there's a bit of burnout, which is to say something that was fun is not fun, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, so, depending on who I'm covering, yeah.
So in terms of leaning in, it's not so much like, oh, where do I get the effort from? It's like, oh, this used to be fun.
So I will tell you, I've written 13 books. Every book, I set myself a different writing challenge. So like there's my content challenge, what am I trying to communicate? And then there's a level up, make it harder. Sometimes it's, this last year was, could I write 3 books in a year? I could, but it nearly killed me.
The answer is barely,
and really hard, and never will I do it again. But bold was, could I write a business book that doesn't suck? Because business books suck. They're terribly written. The stories are bad. They're not. They make up all their own terms so they can brand things their own way, and you can't follow it.
And then they sell you the seminar,
right? And
chapter 3.
The whole thing is
during the workshop.
Exactly. So like, sometimes it's simply with Stealing Fire. It was fact density per sentence. So you talked earlier about cognitive load, right? How much stuff can you hold in your head at one time? So we have this, when we read, every time you see a punctuation mark, especially a period, you're pausing, your brain pauses and it offloads things out of working memory into medium-term storage kind of thing, or it throws it out. And so sentences can hold a certain amount of facts and blah, blah. In Stealing Fire, I had to write a denser style of sentence than I'd ever had to write before. And I also wanted to be a little funnier than some of my other books because I thought the material needed some of that. And so I always said Steven Pinker was my model for density. And there were a couple of other models for humor, and that was the challenge in Stealing Fire. So I think you have to raise the challenge level, right? So, the question, we were talking earlier about the thing you bailed on, which was Dave Chappelle and the comedic simile.
Yeah.
Right? You bailed on it in the video. And you said there's no way I could do that in 30 seconds, right? I could do 4 minutes on it, but how do I? Well, there's a great freaking challenge. Like, that's what I mean by that. Like, lean in.
And so how do you pick a challenge that will create flow instead of be demoralizing or frustrating?
So,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I'm gonna come at it a little sideways, but this is one of the things we see in peak performance, and I sort of think it's foundational. So if you're interested in flow long term, the first thing we teach you is how do you turn curiosity into passion into purpose, and then add in autonomy and mastery into the stack. These are the 5 biggest intrinsic motivators, and they're designed to work together, right? Curiosity gets built into passion. Passion gets turned into purpose. Once you have purpose, you can know what to do with your autonomous time. Oh, I can spend my time advancing my purpose. And then mastery, the last motivator, is the skills that required to accomplish my purpose, right? And you have to stack all of these in a row, right? So when we talked about finding and to prepare for this future, right? Like, because of these user-friendly interfaces, whatever you're interested in, there's going to be a technology there, right? So you literally can follow your passion into the future. So Cutie Pie on that is totally right. You really can. We always tell Peter and I tell people, figure out what you're passionate about, figure out where it intersects some kind of problem in the world that you'd like to see solved. There's a technology that's sitting right there.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have to hop in here because I was talking to my brother yesterday, and he said, I wish I was passionate about something. I'm not passionate about anything. I went, what are you talking about? Like, I see you all the time talking about basketball and playing in your free time. And like, people have this view of passion that automatically incorporates what they think is a viable business or career decision.
Yeah.
And it's just like, get that out of there, because as you're saying, it's all a viable business decision to some degree. I was playing video games when I was a kid. Every adult in my life told me, what are you going to do? Play video games for a living?
Yes, actually.
Turns out. Absolutely.
Turns out.
You're making more money.
Leave me alone.
Dan DMT, anybody?
Exactly.
Right?
So, and I see that in people. So the question is, you're doing something in your free time. I know you have free time, even if it's television, and if it's going, well, that show doesn't work, or that show doesn't work because, that's what I do. I say this joke, I was looking at my cool friends and going, how come everyone laughs at him when he tells a joke but not at me?
Right.
And that's my job now.
Right.
So I just have to jump in and say, everyone has a passion. I truly believe it, and I think it's more obvious than people give it credit for.
So let's just make it more practical. So you can just search my name in the passion recipe. I wrote this for Forbes as a column, but I tell people, start by making a list of 25 things you're curious about. And by curious, all I'm saying is, hey, if time didn't matter and money didn't matter and you had a free weekend, you would want to read a couple of books on this subject, maybe attend a couple of lectures, maybe sit down and have a conversation or two with an expert, right? That's all I mean you're curious about it. Make a list of 25 things you're curious about. There's not enough energy in a single curiosity to create passion, but if you can find a place 3 or 4 or 5 of your curiosities actually intersect, you actually have the foundation of passion, right? So look for intersections of multiple curiosities. Where did they overlay? And I'll give you, I'm not going to give you an example because the one that's probably in my mind is the example that's going to open my new book, and I'm not going to give it away. I'm not giving it to you guys. I like you guys, but not that much.
Trust me, we're not that hard of workers that we'd beat you to.
Yeah.
No. It's just that I want to keep it as a surprise for my readers.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to steal his stuff, or
my new book, Stealing Ideas.
Stealing Ideas. I don't know if that.
So got it. So
okay.
You've got a couple of curiosities,
So just look for the intersection of multiple curiosities, right? And
I'd written down some questions too that I had in here, but you guys can continue. I'm just going to pull them up real quick.
Yeah. Well, what about when you have a passion for your work and then you lose it? how do you stoke it back?
That's an interesting question. Usually I would up the challenge level. Usually I would find a way to up the challenge level, get myself curious again. But that's, I think, sort of a personal answer, much more than a biological answer. I'm giving you what would work for me.
I need new projects personally.
Yeah, I mean, I often,
fresher
I mean,
stuff.
yeah, I do. I don't give up on the old stuff. I organize my life differently.
Organize your wife.
My wife. But I've got there's 3 things that I sort of do on this planet, right? And there's about 3 things I got to do for those 3 things to work. And that's my filter. And those are big mission statement goals. So what is the hard goal that gets me closer? Maybe it's a book. Maybe it's a magazine article. Maybe it's a film. Maybe it's a class. Maybe, right? Those vehicles can change, and I will mix those up to keep it super interesting.
So this is the downside of psychedelics, is when your purpose stops being making money or even changing other people, and it becomes, how do I get good at sitting on a mountaintop for a week alone and being joyful?
That's my purpose.
Work production plummets as your pursuit of that goal increases.
Not a problem.
It's a problem for me because it's not my goal, it's my business partner's goal.
I'll tell you about my meditation.
I see. See.
But so we got save time. I was just reading about one of the effects of all these technologies is free time. And you look at that and you go, oh, great, free time. And that was my thought. But also I've recognized that what a lot of people do with their free time is they fill it up with stuff. And it seems to me that one of the great coping mechanisms of the world is things that they have to do. I have to take my kids to soccer practice. I have to go to work. Because what I found is one of the biggest things that stops beginning entrepreneurs is a terror of the void, as Tim Ferriss calls it. This free, open time to explore yourself, do whatever you want, because they're afraid of what would happen. So I'm curious, and one of the things that I hope is the case is that freed up time won't just go towards scrolling Instagram mindlessly, being on Facebook or filling your social media app, but will go towards introspection. And again, just curious if you've thought at all about what this, because all of the work is going to be done by AI, robots, other things in the medium-term future, it appears. What's left
so for
people?
one, not true.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's back up on that one.
Sure.
And then we'll talk about your question. But what we're seeing right now is the companies that are gaining the best benefit out of AI and robotics are not removing humans. They're collaborating. So the largest growth category in robotics are cobots, cooperative robots that we work together with. A bunch of companies, BMW, Tesla, 2 good examples, completely automated everything. All robots, no humans. We're going to run the factory 24/7, no humans, and productivity plummeted. They both had to reintroduce humans back into what seems to work best is humans and robots and AI all working together as a collaborative, because they're different strengths. And I don't
What is the unique human strength there?
Yeah,
so robots never get tired, they work all the time. AI is going to be brilliant.
Yeah,
what
is that just a symptom of weak AI?
It may be a symptom of weak AI at some point, and strong AI, weak AI. These are technical. I'm assuming you're.
No. This is. I don't think Ben means it technically at all.
No. So strong AI is an actual term that means something. Yeah. Okay. So yes, you may be right, but it doesn't seem to be entirely that way. We have really advanced, weird-ass pattern recognition system brains that can do all kinds of lateral stuff that are it's really hard to get computers to do. I'm not saying they won't get there.
Where's our final frontier?
I was going to say, do you think that AI will never surpass humans in terms of intelligence?
So one, by the time we're having this discussion, brain-computer interfaces will have advanced to the point that we're going to be able to, you're perceiving this as if we're static.
It'll be a tie,
and they're growing.
It'll be a tie because everyone will become a supercomputer.
I mean, we were talking about uploading our consciousness to the web, right? If we have shared collective consciousness, right? These are interesting questions.
Sure.
And so everything seems to be evolving in its state. So I'm not worried, like the obsolescence stuff, that's less concerning to me. The free time, the quality of your life, that stuff concerns me because it does seem like you free up time for people and they don't even do it. They don't even spend it on their most pleasurable activity, right? Like, one of the things I always tell people is make a list of the 10 things that make you feel the best on the planet, the absolute best, and then compare anything you're going to waste your time with against that, right? I can spend 10 minutes every hour today checking Twitter or social media or whatever, or I can put that all together at the end of the day and go surfing for 70 minutes, right? Or go sit in the woods and meditate for 70 minutes, that sort of thing. So I just don't think with all the distractions, you just take it one step further and just run the math.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's the challenge.
How does this compare to this thing that brings me great joy?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what you're trading on.
I think that's the challenge people face, is that they know that in conceptually, but then they struggle to not get lured into the stuff that's more instantaneous.
So here's the other thing. I was talking about this earlier. You can't. So flow is a cycle. It's a 4-stage process. It doesn't work like a binary. You're not in the zone or out of the zone. There's a initial struggle stage. Before the stage, there's a period there, and then there's the flow stage itself, and there's a recovery period on the back end. Because flow is neurobiologically expensive, and you actually have to shut things down on the back end and recover. How the hell did we get here? What was I talking about a second ago? I looked at you and I got totally lost.
Oh, so you're talking about the 4 stages of flow and what people are going to do with their saved time.
Distraction. So on the back end of a flow state, if you have a really intense flow state, riding or skiing or whatever, for me, the next day, because I've used up a lot of the norepinephrine and dopamine my brain uses to focus, I can't focus as well. Right, and I start every day with a 4-hour writing session. That's what I like to do. And if I can't focus as well, massive amounts of distraction. You can't fight state all that much. You can't really fight your biology if you're in that distractible, exhausted state.
Oh, Tony Robbins would hate that sentence so much.
But what you can do is steer your distractions. So I always tell people, like, when I don't want to sit down and start writing because, and I skied all day yesterday. I just want to watch ski videos.
Yeah.
So, okay. Ski videos would be a waste of time, but I'm super distractible. So instead what I will do is I will allow myself the distraction, but instead I will make it, you got to go to the 100 best magazine articles of all time and start reading magazine articles. And that'll be my distraction. And I'll keep reading until I find a sentence where I'm like, oh my God, that's a cool sentence. I want to do that. And now suddenly I'm into my writing. So I go with my distractibility, my state, because it's hard to argue with it, but I use it, like I let it push me in a direction where I'm going to come back to the thing, right? It's going to actually end up motivating me to do the thing that I was avoiding in the first place. So I find that's what I mean by, like, you can't fight your biology. This is where you are. Okay, cool. But how can I use it to get to where I need to go?
So I want to come back to, where I keep coming is where do humans fit in to the 30-year picture, or maybe it's a 50-year picture, where if I look at the stages of humanity, at the very beginning, it's like the human's job is just to survive. It's just to help you, your family, and your tribe make it through. We evolve, we get to the Enlightenment. Okay, we got to think a little bit more. We get to the industrial age. It's humans' job is to produce with their hands. Then we get to the information age. It's like, no, it's to think wisely and leverage your intelligence to get even more done. And then it seems like eventually AI just beats us there. And it's wiser to have...
Or can replace us, let's say that work becomes optional because you can always slot in an equally intelligent AI.
Or maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it's just more economically feasible to have an artificially intelligent consultant than to have a human with my limited, even with my Neuralink upload. Do you have a vision of what the human role in all of this eventually becomes? Are we...
so I don't try to go
too far out.
Too far out.
Probably smart.
I do it like in science fiction, but like it's...
Well, your science fiction book was 7 years out, right?
Yeah, it was really hard.
Yeah, even then you don't go too far.
And, complexity science, small changes in initial conditions, big changes in outcome. This shit is hard to predict, that sort of stuff.
That makes sense.
But what I am confident of is, here's the thing that I always tell people: if you want to be scared about technological unemployment, is
I do.
that
No.
or if you don't want to be scared about technological unemployment,
I'm excited for it.
Like,
Yeah.
no, I mean, every time a technology has gone exponential, right? We have found an internet-sized opportunity tucked inside.
Got it.
And we haven't seen it until it's been right. Like if you would have come to me in 1993, which is the first time I saw the internet.
Yep.
And said, "This is right. Like this is going to be." I would have just started laughing at you because it was like I was bartending in San Francisco at Christy Turlington's nightclub, and my bar back Anthony Batt comes in with his like old Big Mac computer, when it's the old tower with the, and he's trying to set up the internet so he can show me this thing, and it's taking forever, and it's like 17 minutes to get an email, and he's like, "This is going to change the world."
Yeah.
You're like, it does what again?
Yeah.
Do what? Huh? Right? It was just crazy talk. VR is going to produce that kind of opportunity this year, next year. AR is
And the
probably this
opportunities
year.
inside are
Inside. I mean, how the opportunity is going to be inside of virtual reality. Like you ask me, I think we're seeing like this is, people don't realize it, I don't think, but this is the end of podcasts as we know them. Right, they've got another.
You're the only person I've heard say that, because everyone else is talking about the boom of podcasts.
I think you've got 2-3 years, and I'm not saying it's going to go away. I'm going to say that quality will remain, right? Which is what has happened in every one of these mediums. Quality has remained. The other stuff goes elsewhere. We're going to have what's a. I keep asking my staff. They're like, "You need a podcast." I'm like, "No, tell me what a VR podcast is."
Smart question.
Right. That's we'll have this discussion. Or right. I'm not like, there are guys who are good at this stuff. I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not coming in late to a party to compete with guys who are awesome at it, and I'm not, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I'm going to figure out where the puck's going to be, and I'm going to start, what's a podcast like when you have haptics, right? Even if I can send sensations to my listeners, even crudely, what is that like? Those are questions I'm starting to ask myself and think about. And certainly it's not like I think Joe Rogan is going anywhere, right? Like Tim Ferriss, right? Like these guys are great at what they do. They're really good at doing this, and as long as they continue to be interested in the medium, I think the medium will have them. Right. But I think it's the millions of marketers who are trying to start podcasts to sell whatever widget or consulting, this, that thing. Like that's going to stop. Right. But all of that stuff. So here's the good news about all that stuff. And I sort of like this. One of the things that has happened is that you could game a lot of the technological systems because they were built on things like keywords.
I immediately thought of SEO.
SEO. So here's what the other thing nobody's starting to realize is that AIs are writing books, they're making movies, they're judging books, they're judging movies, right? So what is happening is AIs are getting trained up in what does quality content actually look like. And as soon as the AIs really have a deep understanding of quality content, we're talking 3, 5, 8 years, that window, you can't, like, SEO is gone, right? You have to, it's actually got to be based on quality.
Well, even then, can I compete? So let's play. I don't know if this game's going to work. 3, 5, 8 years, they're creating content and they're judging it. And they're spitting out to themselves and internally reviewing millions of different Charisma on Command breakdown style videos. And then they're selecting the one that they have deemed the best and publishing it. Can I even hang?
Yeah, well, but one, you're not. I think you're treating your audience as a monolith. You're going to have, there's going to be a part of your audience that is like, man, I'm good with, like, I just want this technique, and I'm good with AI Charlie, right? Like that's whatever that is, that's fine, because but like, there's going to be other people who are like, no, you know what? I like the human. I'd like the human with the errors, and maybe it's not quite right, and right? People are talking about the end of retail.
That's my edge, is that I make mistakes.
Well, the end of retail. Peter, my co-author, likes to say, in retail, there's two kinds of businesses: those that are working with AI, or those that are going to be in bankrupt in a couple of years. And maybe, but like, aren't there going to be craft retail shop. Like, I went to a suit store and got fitted by an actual human tailor, right?
Yeah.
Of course that's going to happen because we're social creatures and blah, blah, blah.
I think
right?
there's a movie that has this, where they have the most valuable possessions that they own are things that were created by humans before, like, this is a future movie, obviously, everything was perfect. And they're obsessed with their bowls that aren't actually the perfect half of a circle. Yeah. They love them, yeah.
Well, there's a whole, we use the term stealing fire at the end of it. Can't remember, there's a Japanese word for it, but where beauty is the imperfection.
Yep, they crack the bowl.
They crack the bowl. I can't.
And they fill the crack with gold.
Wabi-sabi.
There
you go.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Nailed it.
Good job.
Word for word, Justin's bringing the most value.
Justin brings the noise.
Justin first, me fourth. You two somewhere in the middle.
See what else. So I have
a question.
Go ahead.
So I think a lot of people, they do these activities, myself included, that can lead to flow. Writing, skiing, surfing, but they don't get into flow every time.
No.
Have you found that there is a formula or a recipe that gives you the highest percentage? Because you can tell afterwards, like, wow, that was a flow writing session. That was a flow surf session.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it was 10 times more fun. How do I...
So honestly, and this is exactly what we do at Zero to Dangerous.
Yep.
This is like, this is what our trainings are about. There's a flow cycle. This is a map of the experience. If you know where you are in the cycle, you know where to go next. And there are triggers, 22 triggers. So if you can understand how the triggers work and you can understand the map of the cycle, it's not a guaranteed, but you can make it reliable and repeatable. Mm-hmm. And the way I always like to say it is, these days, 90% of the time when I go skiing, and I ski a lot, I'm in a flow state. Mm-hmm. 70% of the time when I write, I'm in a flow state, and this is a daily activity. For flow, when I'm researching the state of flow, that's often a really great flow state for me. Like, I'm reading like a textbook and pausing and really thinking about, that sort of thing. Really deep flow. That's probably like 50%, right? Like that kind of thing. You can really up your percentages. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of simple biology. It's not, none of it is really, really hard. I always say that, like, the dirty little secret about peak performance is that 90% of what you're going to do, other than like kind of the goal setting exercise, like the stuff you have to do to get into the game, you have to line up your intrinsic motivators, you have to get goal setting right, and you have to train up grit skills, and those are unpleasant, right? There's no way to train grit that's particularly pleasant. You got to do that stuff. But everything else is pretty much an item that goes in your schedule, or an attitude with which you approach the item on your schedule. That's everything we're talking about here, right? Peak performance is a checklist. I mean, I study people who make the impossible possible, right? That's what I spent my life studying. Invariably, it's a checklist.
So would you be giving away your IP to go into that checklist? Because I don't want you.
No,
I don't want you to.
I mean, but invariably people get up. So I always talk about this. Let's just talk about one of the flow triggers and how it functions. So clear goals is a flow trigger, and clear goals are really, so you have, I like to say there are 3 levels to goal setting. There's massively transformative purposes on top, right? This is my mission statement. I am here to make the planet a better place for animals, or I'm here to write great books, which are sort of 2 of mine. Then underneath that, there are high, hard goals. All the sub-steps. I'm going to get a college degree. I'm going to write my first book, right? Those are high, hard goals. Underneath that are your clear goals. This is the shit you're doing today, right? And clear goals are a flow trigger because they lower cognitive load. When goals are clear, so like a clear goal is, I'm going to write 500 words of my new book, and the words are going to make you feel happy, or make the reader feel happy, or make the reader feel, right? That would be a very clear goal. It's a very specific start. My answer to you, possible, is a checklist. So when we teach this to people, right, it's a to-do list. You obviously want to start, if you can, with your hardest task first, for a lot of biological reasons. But there's only a certain number of things you can do in a day. I can do 8 things and still be excellent at all of them. That's what I've discovered over time. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 9. Usually it's about 8. So I make my clear goal list. It's got 8 things on it, because I know I can only be excellent at 8 things. Clear goals lists also, as you know, when you check them all off the list, right, you get a little bit of dopamine for every time you accomplish a goal. and you can declare your day a win. And for peak performers who never like to chill out, being able to be like, oh wow, I won the day. I can now is when I pause, right? That's really, really, really fortunate. So my answer to you is figure out how many things you can be excellent in a day at, and just do that, and don't deviate from that too much.
So a more rigid schedule, not rigid, but
it's not rigid. I mean, you can have as much freedom, but like, and I find like on my clear goal lists, there are like 3 or 4 things that they're hard, right? Maybe it's advance the novel, 700 words kind of thing.
Talk to Ben and Charlie.
Talk to Ben and Charlie. Struggle through that, and then, nail some spikes through my eyes so I can feel better.
So we got 3 or 4 things already.
That's why. And then but then the other will be like, make a phone call to so-and-so, or walk my dog for an hour, or, that's a good workout, or blah, 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 that sort of thing. So it's, a couple of really hard, and then diminish it. And, obviously you vary it day to day based on your energy level and your focus level and where you're at a little bit. But that's always what it looks like. Mm-hmm. I like to tell this story of so Peter Diamandis, my co-author, created the X Prize, which helped unlock the space frontier, right? Took space out of the hands of government, put it in the hands of ordinary people, and actually turned space into a thriving business. And he didn't do it alone, but he was very much responsible for it with the X Prize. And I've known Peter for 20 some odd years, and want to know what it looked like when Peter accomplished the impossible? He woke up, he had breakfast, he went somewhere, he had a conversation, he went somewhere else, he had a conversation, he typed into his computer for a while, went somewhere else, had a conversation, then he had lunch, right? I mean, it doesn't look anything different than your days or your day or anybody else's day. The quality of the conversations are a little bit different, those kinds of things, but we all have the same 24 hours, and we're going to roughly do the same things with them anyways. It's not super, we like to make it super fancy because we like to feel, a lot more complicated than we are.
I have 2 more, but if...
Yeah, well, I just want to say, because I think people are going to like this a lot and want to dig into it. It's 0 to Dangerous. I just want to reiterate
0todangerous.com will get you there. flowresearchcollective.com will get you there. 0 to Dangerous, we do it one of 2 ways. It's either 2-day live training with me and the rest of the team, followed by a digital class, or it's the digital class and you go through the class. All my coaches are either licensed psychologists, like they're PhD psychologists or neuroscientists. So you go through the class with a PhD psychologist or neuroscientist, and it's one of those 2 things.
Cool. I think people are going to be hyped on that. So go ahead.
So I know that you can invest in a lot of ways. You can invest your time, your energy, and we've seen where you've invested your time and energy. I'm curious if any of these particular technologies have stood out to you as a place to invest your wealth, your money, whether it's particularly AR, VR, any of these.
I have some money in a handful of companies, but not a lot. I'd rather at the Flow Research Collective, we are working at the intersection of AI and VR and networks. So I'm investing my company in some of these things. More than anything else, because when you like to live in the middle of nowhere and very far away and have a bunch of land, most of my money went into my land and my house.
Real estate.
Yeah.
So you're still big on the 3D world. It's not going to be all VR too fast.
The one lesson over and over and over again, this is what I learned. Multiple streams of income, right? Multiple streams of income is the secret, especially in an accelerating society, especially if you're doing anything freelance or entrepreneurial. Multiple streams of income. So that's what I did over, after the last and 2007 recession. I made less money in 2007 than I made the first year I was a journalist when I was 23.
Wow.
It was terrifying.
Wow.
Right?
It's like $9.
I've gone bankrupt twice. I've almost both once when I was sick and I bankrupt myself. And this 2007, I was really close. I was right on the edge. So after that, I was like, oh my God, my whole industry has now gone away twice, right? Like, fool me once, right? Fool me. I was like, multiple streams of income as much as possible.
That's something that we don't do. We should do that.
Well, what I'm trying to do is small tangent. I want to give my money to smart other business owners, get a small percentage of their business, and then have them be my multiple streams of income.
Tiny little private equity guy.
Yeah, that's my goal.
So
baby equity.
Yeah, baby equity.
Baby equity with Ben.
Baby equity with Ben.
I like that because angels seem so so
big,
and babies just
you're like I'm gonna give you $5,000 and you're gonna give me $1 a day for the rest of your life or something like that, right?
Do I have 5,000 days? I think I do. So, and then the last one, you'd mentioned it just briefly, but you said you work with dogs and you're trying to like move. You have a program around that. I'm just curious what you're up to with.
So we're morphing. Because we moved recently, so we shifted the rescue a little bit. But my wife and I, we're still committed to this mission. We do hospice care and special needs care. We tend to work with very, very old, very, very abused. So if you were tied to a raider, beaten for 10 years, have cancer, one eye, 3 legs, and are an aggressive personality and the tendency to shit on the carpet, you're our dude.
Oh,
wow.
Like we did it when we were in New Mexico. We were living in the second poorest county in America with the highest instance of animal cruelty. So we literally intentionally put ourselves on the front line. And like when we created it, my wife said, look, I want to do all the stuff that nobody wants to do. I want to fill like 3 or 4 gaps, right? And I was just dumb enough not to know what the hell she was actually asking of me. It's like, absolutely, honey, let's do that.
Yeah.
Right? I had no idea how much like suffering and heartbreak and difficulty I was in for. Thank God. But now, as I said, we're trying to Joy is going to start finding ways to train a lot of other rescuers, because a lot of people, they get their hearts broken. They lose their lives to this because they'll find themselves, suddenly overrun by animals.
Trying to save every animal.
Everything, right. So
I see this all the time.
Yeah. So nobody is actually training rescuers in any way, and she doesn't. I don't think she actually. I think she wants to give it away, like podcast wasn't. So she's going to focus on that for a little while.
That's so smart. I just have to, because I know a lot of these people, and they are the least business savvy.
No, they're terrible.
Self-care people. They just have such bleeding hearts that they try to do everything, except it's all on the front line with my own hands,
it's
and not
highly.
So
the other
leveraged.
one, so I have, and I'm not gonna give this away because this is something that I am gonna do, but I spent 10 years thinking about the problem you just and I was like, because animal rescue in general, there's no government funding, right? If you give money to the SPCA, you are funding a euthanasia program. That's what you're doing. You're just paying to put animals down. So it's all private donation, and give me your money is a terrible formula for anything, when I'm much more interested in entrepreneurial solutions, right?
Yeah.
So is there an entrepreneurial solution to try to fund this stuff? So I think I have a idea that's good enough, and that'll create big enough revenue streams off of this, and I want to use it to franchise. The Rancho de Chihuahua model, our organization is called Rancho de Chihuahua, is based on evolutionary psychology. We create environments very similar to the environment dogs evolved in, so they feel safer. We have flow at the heart of our healing methodology for a number of reasons, but the neurochemicals that show up in the state, one, they reset the nervous
For dogs,
system.
are you saying?
Yeah.
Like
dogs
dog flow.
Oh yeah, dogs get into flow.
All right.
Easily. Oh yeah, I wrote a whole book about this. Furry Prayer. Furry Prayer talks about, so really about the relationship between humans and animals, but most mammals can get into flow, especially social mammals. And there are reasons for that, and we can talk about it, but we won't. So anyways, we have a healing methodology that it works really well. We can take a dog with like late stage cancer, whatever, we're supposed to live a couple of months from the vet, and we can get 4 or 5 years of really, and we take our dogs off leash into the backcountry every day hiking. So like when I say healthy, vibrant, I mean like they're hiking 5 miles a day
ever,
in the mountain kind of thing. So I like our model. I think it works. It's very effective for the animals. And I want to franchise it. And so I think I've got an entrepreneurial based way to pay for it. And so I am like, there are, a couple of industries and partners and whatever. So that's what I'm working on, is how do you do that? That's part
awesome.
of it. And I also, I'm not deeply involved in it anymore, but I helped start a company called Planet Home that was trying to bring environmentalists and technologists together to solve big, grand issues. My issue being biodiversity, because animals again. So I was like, we always say this at Rancho de Chihuahua. I mean, we literally traded 13 years of our lives. My wife and I have never been on a honeymoon.
Wow.
We have been on 2 vacations together, and both of them were 2-day vacations. So we've been married for 14 years. We've had 2 vacations where we've taken them together and no honeymoon, because it's all been given to the dogs, and that's fantastic. And we did a lot of good when we were operating it. We probably helped. It was we rehomed and found and like 500 or 600 dogs. We on our outreach programs, we probably helped another 5,000, 6,000, and that's a lot of lives. But like, they kill 20 million dogs a year, so like, I didn't even frickin' dent December, right? And we like, it was 13 years of our life, and we didn't even just dent December. So like, okay, there's gotta be a bigger lever, right? So I've been looking for bigger levers.
That is awesome, because I often think when I see these people with, they are so willing to put in hard equity, sweat equity, they'll clean up the poop, but it's like, there is not a business mind amongst them going, how do we do this?
No, at all. And worse, they're massively empathetic. Which,
and so they can't. They're so reactive to everything. Oh, there's dog. I gotta pick that one up. Can somebody please? And so they can't step back.
Driving through a city. Well, driving through Mexico with my wife was terrifying, because like, people treated their animals like shit, and there were stray dogs all over the place, and like, we could go out for some ice cream and come back with 4 dogs, right? Like, it was terrifying after a certain point, right? Like, I was like, how much of my money am I going to give to the dogs? Like,
so this is a great segue for I guess this is my last one right now, but you've done a lot of things. You've mentioned that they've been difficult at times, that writing has nearly killed you, that there was a tremendous amount of suffering involved with this animal rescue. I'm curious, of the things in your life, what has net really been the most fulfilling or brought you the most joy? What are the handful of things, whether it's the dog rescue, the career, your relationships? And then I'd be also curious, on the backside, is there something that you pursued kind of doggedly that just didn't fulfill?
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of answers on that, but as I said, I do 6 things, right? I try to make the world a better place for animals. I try to write books that have an enormous impact, and both from a craft and art perspective and from a content perspective. Try to hurl myself down mountains at high speeds.
Yeah, it's another one. Skiing, right? Skiing,
downhill mountain biking. Sometimes it's surfing, and that's a little variation. Mountains of water. I do that. The friends and family. You know what I mean? Like, my favorite thing to do in the world is laugh at my best friend. Like, I will take laughing at my best friend over I will take anything else, pretty much. So, it's really like, those things are amazing. I as of yet cannot play a musical instrument, despite a lot of trying. Like, I can do a lot of things. I cannot seem to play. I can dance. I can draw. Right? I cannot. And I want, like, my retirement plan for flow is a musical instrument, right? Like, if I get, my body can't get to the point where I can't hurl myself down mountains. Though I saw this amazing exoskeleton for skiing the other day. So, and I like out here now, like, it was one of the inventions of the year. Like, maybe it was a Time invention of the year, but I was like, oh, good, my ski career just got really long.
Just gonna be knocking
like,
down
as long
trees,
as we can fight back climate change, and I can keep my winters, right?
But the transformer going down the mountain.
I don't care how ugly it looks. I just care how it makes me feel. So there's there are the other thing
is music the unfulfilling one?
Music was one. I mean, there are so many colossal, ridiculous, silly failures along the way. I helped start 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 different magazines. I think a couple of them are still in existence, but like, there was a lot of that stuff. I was involved in a lot.
Was it unfulfilling? So I'm
not necessarily unsuccessful.
Unfulfilling.
Yeah, so I think things that in my life have been unfulfilling. I'll give you a brief example. Like, I do enjoy the videos that I make. I enjoy the content process, but I thought that having a bit of internet, F-list celebrity notoriety would bring any amount of joy, and it hasn't. Like, the millions of subscribers are only fulfilling insofar that I feel that I've helped people, but the fact that I am recognized ultimately
It's empty calories, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the fame.
completely empty. So I'm curious if you've been, oh wow, like I really went for that and it didn't fill me up in the way that I'd hoped. Because it sounds like the dog and the skiing.
By the way, I will tell you,
have.
this is actually, I don't think I've ever said this before, but I will say this. Magazine journalism, this thing that I loved more than anything. So that still this day is a fiefdom run by New York Magazine editors. And it's a very closed, insular group of people. And a lot of them are not my favorite people in the world at all. There was a previous generation of editors I loved, but and that would be very, very that was very, very frustrating. This thing that I loved and the people I was working with, I had a really hard time connecting. I would go to New York, I'd go into these meetings, and I'd feel like I was back in high school. Like I felt like, oh, you're in a clique and you're just judging me. Like I don't ever feel shitty about myself, but I'm with like the people I work with, and you make me feel terrible. Yeah. Right. No wonder I work like long. So there was some of that stuff where it was a round peg in a square hole kind of thing. And I
think that's applicable to a lot of people, which is having to spend your day at work or elsewhere with people that don't make you feel good. Even if the industry is one you're interested in, that'll suck the life right out of you.
Yeah, it'll take the life right out of you. And certainly, like, the worst thing ever is to be unrewarded for your work, right? Like the number one cause of burnout is I give my heart and soul to this thing and you don't recognize it. There are books I've written that were horrific experiences, really just difficult, unpleasant. And I mean, that's one of the funny things about, I've written a lot of bestsellers. Some of them I think are great. Some of them I don't. Like, I'm like, really?
I feel the same way about my video reception.
Right? I'm like, really? That's a bet. Like, Bold, for example, it was on the bestseller list for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 14. I mean, like it was like, Bold's an interesting book, and like, but it's one of my least favorite books, and it's done remarkably well, and. Okay, right.
What was one that you loved, and when you wrote it, you're like, "This is going to be amazing," and then no one cared.
Last Tango was that book,
fiction one.
For sure. And the reason is, this is a repeated problem in my life, is I have a really hard time figuring out where the mainstream is. I'm just not that, right? So Last Tango is another one of those. I thought it was going to go wide. I thought everybody was going to read it. Like, no, it was so stylized. I didn't even realize how stylized it was. And it's really a little, right? And it great reception, was an Amazon bestseller, but it didn't go, I thought it was going to go everywhere. And that was a tough one. Better now, Small Furry Prayer was the worst of those because I was so poor, and it was nominated for a Pulitzer. Everybody thought it was going to explode, and I was so sure it was going to change my life. And what I mean by that was like financial stability, actually finally, yes. And it was the funniest book in the world because it became a bestseller, but it took a year and a half. I don't know why, but like a year and a half later, it suddenly was all over on the Wall Street Journal bestseller, and that sort of thing. And it took a really long time to get there, and everybody, including the publisher, that was just, I had worked so hard and so long, you know what I mean? So there were a lot of those experiences along the way.
Books are tough because you really, a lot of the things can be co-created today, and books are one that oftentimes don't get seen by the audience until they're completed. Same thing with movies and that kind of stuff. And man, you put in a year or more into some of these. And
the other thing is, I've learned though, and I'm interested to see if this starts to happen to you with some of your videos. So I always say, and I know this now, but it took me a long time to figure this out, that you can't judge the success of a book for at least 6 years.
Oh, it's true of videos.
It's really slow, right? It's like you have no idea so you really long before you can actually say this was a success, this was a failure.
But it's nice to overreact week one, isn't it?
Yeah, to freak out.
I now go massively far out of my way to get things in between me and my ability to check like the Amazon ranking. I'm like, how's my book doing? How's my book doing? Or how many hits does my video have? Right? Like those cheap dopamine loops. Those are the things. Like, so if you come to a Flow Research Collective event, all our gear says never trust the dopamine.
Yeah.
And by the way, flow is built out of dopamine. Like you need this, but it says never trust the dopamine. And it's because it can often be, it's often empty calories and things that it's not long-term value. We were talking about this earlier. It's funny. People come to us very often because they want success, right? They peak performance, they want success, and they're disappointed because success, quality rises to the top. And success is, if there's a shortcut out there, it's not going to produce lasting success. You may end up making a bit of money at some point because you gamed the system, but you didn't learn anything. Like, there's no learning along the way, and you didn't develop your craft, right? Peak performance and success, these things work by compound interest. The interesting thing is, all the things, so the question I always ask people is, I can't, material success, that sort of thing, like, you still have to earn that the old-fashioned way, but all the things you think you need material success for, happiness, well-being, overall life satisfaction, passion, purpose, like all that stuff, turns out that stuff is low-hanging fruit, and I can teach all that stuff you get with flow, right? And flow over time, your performance will get better for sure, massively, but
it's almost the cherry on top at that point.
But even with the massive improvement, success is still a long road. It just is. It's like, it's climbed very slowly, and you can get famous by accident. You can have Brad Pitt's abs, and you can get cast in Thelma and Louise, right? That can happen. But you can't have Brad's career without being great. You know what I mean? Nobody, you can get famous accidentally. You cannot stay famous accidentally. Nobody has stayed famous accidentally, and I don't care, or stayed successful accidentally in any field. It's too hard, and there's too much competition. So I don't know if that.
No, it's great. I like that. I like that to wrap.
Yeah, I'm good. You guys want to get lunch?
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
Guys.
Thanks for watching.
Hope this wasn't too boring.
Awesome.